Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Insha'Allah, we're moving on to a beautiful hadith today. This hadith is actually one of my favorites in all of hadith collections. A very famously known hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that, and this was narrated by a companion by the name of Hamza Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu. And in the actual hadith itself, the narrator, it says here that Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu was known as Khadimi Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He was the servant of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The reason why that's worth mentioning is because whenever you read the name of a rawi, the name of a narrator, you always have to think about the rawi's relationship with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? So I'll give you guys an example. We read a couple of hadith from Al-Hasan and Al-Husayn radiallahu anhuma, who were the grandchildren of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? So when you think about that particular context, you know that whatever Al-Hasan and Al-Husayn are sharing, it is going to be very much from that relationship of a grandfather to their grandchildren, right? When you look at a hadith that is narrated by Anas ibn Malik radiallahu an, keep in mind that this is the same Anas ibn Malik radiallahu an who used to say that I spent years in the khidmah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Anas ibn Malik radiallahu an, by the way, would say that I would run behind the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam with his sandals, his chappals, right? He would say that that's sometimes the work that I would do, where it's not like some sort of like lofty khadim, where you're doing some lofty work. Anas ibn Malik was like, I would literally follow the Prophet ﷺ around with his shoes. That's what I would do. And here he calls himself Khadimi Rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, that he was proudly the khadim, the servant of the Prophet ﷺ. And Anas ibn Malik, notably by the way, he said, even after decades of serving the Prophet ﷺ, not once did he ever ask me, why did I do it like this, or why did I not do it like that? Can you imagine? Subhanallah, we have people in our own families where we tell them, why didn't you do it better? Why did you give me the tea like this? Or why did the dinner taste a little bit different tonight? Or why does the furniture look different today? We speak like that to our families. The Prophet ﷺ wouldn't even speak like that to his own khadim. Think about that. And it's a full right, by the way. If there is a sayyid and a khadim, a master and a servant, it is very reasonable for the master to speak to a servant that illustrates the hierarchy of that relationship. But the Prophet of Allah ﷺ never ever made Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anh feel that he was his khadim. And this was the hubb. This is the love that was cultivated because of that type of behavior that the Prophet ﷺ, he inspired in his community. So now listen to the hadith that we're sharing today, because now the hadith will be that much more meaningful. The hadith, it reads, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. This is the hadith today. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that none of you truly believe ahadukum hatta, until yuhibbu li akhihi ma yuhibbu li nafsi, until you love for your brother what you love for yourself. So I want you to think, there was an influence that the Prophet ﷺ had on Anas ibn Malik about the topic of hubb to begin with. You know, sometimes, and I shared this, by the way, I teach on Tuesday evenings here at ICF before Isha, and I said sometimes there are certain people in your life that will restructure the way that you think about certain things. Yes? You know how people say, I didn't know what love was until I met my spouse. I didn't know what love was until I had my children, right? There's truth to this, by the way. There's a lot of truth to this. And it is very possible that Anas ibn Malik radiallahu an, who was one of the younger Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ, he was one of the younger Sahabis of the Prophet ﷺ, maybe he was never treated that way until he came into the
the ownership or the guardianship of the Prophet ﷺ. This is the same exact story about Zayd ibn Haritha radiallahu an, by the way. Zayd ibn Haritha, the same companion who was taken into slavery because he was a captive of war. And years later, after Khadija radiallahu anha, she gifted Zayd ibn Haritha to the Prophet ﷺ. Zayd ibn Haritha's father came looking for him in Mecca. And he looked at Zayd and he said, Zayd, I'm here, come with me. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, well, rather than us two debating on who should keep Zayd, why don't we let Zayd himself choose who he would like to stay with? And in the seerah, we understand sahihan that Zayd ibn Haritha chose to stay with the Prophet ﷺ even after his father came and found him. What does that tell you? It tells you that the Prophet ﷺ literally taught people what love was. This is the way that you love someone. This is the way that you take care of somebody. And so he claims this narration, none of you truly believe. La yu'minu ahadukum. What does this mean? La yu'minu ahadukum. La yu'minu ahadukum does not mean that you're not a Muslim. That's not what it means. The Prophet said, you're not a Muslim until you love for your brother what you love for yourself. The Prophet says, none of you truly have Iman until you love for your brother what you love for yourself. Meaning that your Iman is there. You obviously believe, تُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ وَبِرَسُولِهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. You believe in all the tenets of faith. But your faith has not reached its full completion. Why? Because until a person exhibits a level of selflessness, يُحِبُّ لِأَخِيهِ مَا يُحِبُّ لِنَفْسِهِ, you cannot truly understand what faith actually is. Let me give you a reason why. When you love for your brother what you love for yourself, there's a reality of asking the question, what do you love for yourself? If I were to ask any single one of you here, I ask you, what do you love for yourself? Do you love for yourself the lowest, the middle, or the best? Or even good or the best? Everybody would say what? The best. I want the best of everything. I want the best job. I want the best house. I want the best family. I want the best marriage. I want the best car. I want the best whatever. So when you ask yourself, what would you like in your own life? And you would say, I'd like the best. Now how do you read, يُحِبُّ لِأَخِيهِ مَا يُحِبُّ لِنَفْسِهِ? None of you truly believe until you want for your brothers or sisters the best. You have to want for them the best. And Imam Nawawi rahimahullah, he actually even says in his sharh that this akhihi, your brother or sister, is not specifically for even the believers. You should love for your neighbors. You should love for your non-Muslim friends. Because if you love your non-Muslims, what should you want for them? Hidayah. You should want for them Islam, right? رَبَّنَا لَا تُزِغْ قُلُوبَنَا بَعْدَ إِذْ هَدَيْتَنَا. Right? We make this dua for ourselves. Oh Allah, do not allow ourselves to stray away from Islam. بَعْدَ إِذْ هَدَيْتَنَا. After you've guided us. So if you want that for yourself, you make that dua for yourself. يُحِبُّ لِأَخِيهِ مَا يُحِبُّ لِنَفْسِهِ means that you love for your non-Muslim what you love for yourself. If you love Islam for yourself, you should love Islam for your non-Muslim neighbor. And then the scholars, they say that in Islam, there's an interesting concept that I'll share with everybody tonight. In Islam, and this is actually in the science called mantiq. Mantiq basically means like logic, right? It means like this idea of like being able to logically think about things. The scholars of mantiq, they say that there's a reality of what you would call aqs in Arabic, which means the opposite also being true, okay? So, if you love for your brother what you love for yourself, what must you also accept? That I dislike for my brother what I dislike for my own self. And this is where the scholars, they make a very beautiful point here. They say the same way that you would dislike for your own sins to be publicized, for your own mistakes to be shared, you should also hide the sins of your community, your brothers and the sisters. Hide not meaning if there's somebody doing something harmful to other people, not saying keep it under the rug and brush it under the rug. But what I'm saying is, if there's a person who's going through something private with Allah, it is not up to you and me to publicize it. So you dislike for your brother what you dislike for yourself. And I'll end inshallah with a beautiful, beautiful supporting hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. And this is very, very profound because a lot of us actually have lost the art of being able to do this. This hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, it says here, and it's a narrator by the name of Al-Miqdam ibn Ma'di radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, where he said that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, قال إذا أحب الرجل أخاه فليخبره أنه يحبه. If one of you loves his brother, then what does he say? فليخبره أنه يحبه. Tell your brother that you love them. Don't hide it. You know, for some reason, we have this understanding that Islam, it means to kind of be like tough. Don't show your emotions too much because showing your emotions is weak. Brothers and sisters, because I know sisters are also listening, I'm going to share one thing with you. It's very, very important. We have to be able to differentiate farq bayna, the difference between Islam and our own personal traditions. Nowhere in Islam does it ever say to hide your emotions that you feel for somebody else. And this comes from the story even of the Prophet ﷺ, where he was kissing his grandchildren, and the Prophet and this man approached him and he said, "Fawallahi, I swear by God, Ya Rasulullah, I have 10 sons and I have never kissed even any one of them." And he's trying to prove to the Prophet ﷺ that he's some sort of like, you know, masculine, macho, right, rough, rugged guy. You know, the Prophet ﷺ said to him, the Prophet ﷺ, he says, how can you expect me to understand when Allah has removed mercy from your heart? We don't have that in Islam, by the way. So the Prophet orders, if you love somebody, if you love your brother for the sake of Allah, you love your family for the sake of Allah, make sure you tell them. Our children, by the way, suffer because of this. You know the idea of love languages? People have different love languages. Some of our love languages is like acts of kindness or, you know, acts of service and this and that, all that stuff. I'll tell you one thing. Universally, people's love language is actually just by sharing it with them. The Prophet ﷺ would never shy away. I love Mu'adh ibn Jabal because of this and this. I love Abdurrahman ibn Auf because of this and this. I love Abdullah ibn Mas'ud because of this and this. I love Abu Bakr as-Siddiq because of this and this. Let people know that you care about them. This is a part of our deen. So inshallah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to be people who selflessly love for our brothers and sisters what we love for ourselves. And we also dislike for our brothers and sisters what we dislike for ourselves. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the courage and the ihsan and the mercy to be able to share that love upon our tongues for our community. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us more and more like His beloved Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Ameen Rabbil Alameen. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Allah yabarak fik.